We had planned to do this in March of last year, so it's really exciting to kind of hit the reset button and, and start again and be able to share this with you. My grandmother, Julia Mae Black, was born in Akron, Colorado on Valentine's Day, 1915. She was the 8th child of Hugh and Loretta Baxter Black. His first wife, Ann Lavering, had died in childbirth, and 5 years later, he married the nurse who came to take care of the newborn, and together they had 11 children who lived to adulthood. Growing up in such a large family is part, I'm sure, of why my grandma had the sewing skills she needed to make this quilt. But this is a photo of their family, and like I say, she was 8th out of 12. So they probably sewed a lot of their own clothing and maybe from flour sacks. In 1938, she was a young married mother of a 2-year-old, and that 2-year-old was my father, and there's a picture of them together on the back table. And they were living in a trailer in the oil fields at Lance Creek, north of Lusk. Her sister Gladys Rumney was the postmaster at Spencer, and the post office really just consisted of a place in their home that was dedicated to delivering the mail. So in Niobrara County, there were no first-class post offices when the Airmail Week was announced. The Lusk post office was 2nd class. I think Lance Creek was 3rd class, and all of these others were 4th class post offices because they were just in people's homes. So that kind of is a backdrop of before the airmail promotion was announced. So once they decided they were going to do this, it seems like to me the Lusk Lions Club was a driving force behind it. They really decided we're going to make this a big deal. We're going to have a pageant. We're going to dedicate the airport. We're going to beat the national goal, which the United States Postmaster's goal was to have 1 airmail letter for each person in the United States. So in Niobrara County, they had 5,000 residents, give or take, and they delivered more than 10,000 letters. So they doubled the U.S. Postmaster's goal of 1 letter per capita during this special week to promote airmail. So they were very proud of that. The other driving forces, as I've gone through my family records, it was the Lusk Herald, and you can see a lot of the Lusk Herald clippings over here. So you have the postmaster who's very invested in this succeeding. Shortly after this, Lusk got a brand new post office for $85,000, and Riverton, Wyoming also got a new post office. So there's historical context there, I think. But thanks to the Lions Club and to the Lusk Herald, they printed the cachet envelopes and really pushed selling those. And the postmaster wanting this to go forward, it did in big style. So they had a pageant, they had a film crew there. It really was, it seems like a unifying event for the county. It was a big county, and like I say, a lot of post offices. Gladys Rumney, my grandma's sister, was the postmaster at Spencer. And like I said, that was just in their home. And then when they did the airmail promotion, the plane just landed in the cow pasture, like it did for all the others except for Lusk. It was the only one, I think, with a landing strip. And Gladys's husband, Ed Rumney, was from England. And the Lusk Herald printed kind of like a gossip column, you know, when people had dinner at other people's houses, you know how they have the little notes around the neighborhood. They said, Ed Rumney sent a letter to England. Ed Rumney, prominent rancher near Spencer, is sending a number of airmail letters from the Spencer Post Office to England, his old home. So Niobrara County will be represented in the United Kingdom. So a lot of those things today we wouldn't think that was newsworthy. That got ink in the Lots Herald newspaper. So kind of exciting. So stories about the quilt. Then of course Grandma showed it to me when I was 16, and I'm like, yeah, Grandma, you made a quilt. That's nice. Okay, let's go do something else. And I guess a cautionary tale. If you have folks in your family that have history, listen to them and record it and take a little bit more note of the things they're trying to tell you, because like that old saying, you know, when an old person dies, a library burns down. So there's a lot of things I don't know about how she made this and the timeline and everything, but I wish I would have listened more and asked her more questions, and I didn't. So that would be a takeaway from tonight. The quilt is 59 by 92 inches. She started it in May when the postmarks, the special cachets became available, and she finished it in August for the Niobrara County exhibit at the Wyoming State Fair in Douglas. So she's a young mother living in the oil fields in, I'm sure, a non-air-conditioned trailer house, and she has a 2-year-old running around, and she made this quilt May, June, July, and had it done in August. So I think that shows some fortitude on her part. When Dad used to give programs about this, he said, I bet I was a lot of help. You imagine how much help a 2-year-old was while you're trying to do an artistic project like this in a small space. Later on in her life, she made a lot of craft items, and those are at the back of the table if you want to look at some of those before you leave tonight. She really, I don't think she ever made another quilt, so it might have been a bit of a traumatic experience, but if she did make other quilts, I'm not aware of them. She did do a lot of other crafts and drawings. She was very artistic. I'm her only grandchild, and so we have a special bond, I feel like. And I have her class ring on. I found it while cleaning out their house, and so we just really do have a nice connection. And I'm glad my dad found a carpet roll to put the quilt on, so it's never been folded. That is hard on the fibers and breaks them down. And I guess if you do fold older pieces like this, you need to unfold them and fold them in different places over time so that crease doesn't wear. So I'm glad that Dad found this carpet roll, and we roll it up and then just wrap it in another sheet. And it was sitting on the end in the ranch house basement, and I went by it one day and I thought, you know, I should just pick that up, because the bottom end was on the floor, the concrete floor. And I just picked it up and put it on a box, and the top end was, you know, up higher on the wall toward the ceiling. And I didn't think too much of it and left, and found out 2 months later the sewage had backed up in the basement of that home, and nobody knew it for a long time, and this would have been completely devastated and ruined. So I'm glad I had that little nudge, that little feeling to pick that end up off the floor, and glad I listened and glad I did it. One other kind of a neat connection with Grandma and her father-in-law, so my great-grandfather, in the little insert in all the cachet envelopes, you'll see his name, Ed Cook. He was a stagecoach driver. So the connection of our family moving the mail goes several generations. So Edmund Alfred Cook drove the Cheyenne Deadwood stage for several years. And in the little program that's in the cachet envelopes, they commemorate all the different ways that mail moved, from Pony Express to Stagecoach and now airmail. So it's, again, a nice connection between the generations that I wanted to share with you. This is a sample of one of the patterns that she used to make the squares on the quilt. Again, 14, one for each of the post offices in Niobrara County. And then she used little planes in between for dividers. You can see that. And then the map of the county is in the very center. Those little airplanes, I kind of wondered where they came from. And if you look on the Lusk Herald news articles, there's a ribbon that runs even above the masthead that is a solid row of little planes. So I'm sure that was part of her inspiration. So these are the cachets, and some of them I have a full set, and some of them are signed by the postmaster of the matching post office where it was stamped. So that's kind of fun. Her sister, Gladys's signature is on the back of one of the envelopes. And Dudley Fields was the postmaster at Hat Creek, which is where my family is kind of centered. So it's nice to have his signature on that cachet as well. So that's kind of my connection to the quilt. And now I'll turn it over to Dave Nesham for kind of the wider historical context.
Thank you, Tena, for this opportunity to speak to y'all tonight about airmail and mail in America and civic pride, I guess. I'm not totally sure what to call it. I'm going to call it civic pride for now. I apologize for not putting Tena's title up. A Stitch in Time, right? Is that the thing? And I think it's important to recognize this quilt as something sort of, I don't even know how to say it, surreal, bizarre, when we got together the first time, I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't done any research on it. Tena had told me that her grandmother made a quilt about airmail, and I'm always more than happy to talk about mail in the United States. And when we got together in the room, we just kind of stood around this thing and was like, what does it mean? You know, we can see it's a big thing. And then to know that she made it with the 2-year-old at her waist while her husband worked in the oil field, not exactly an American story. You know, not exactly the kind of thing that you think about when you think about civic pride. So anyway, the thing we're talking about, May 15th, May 21st, 1938, I want to say it's the 20th anniversary of airmail. Is that correct? I second guess myself. And every time you come across an account of this airmail week, you invariably get a characterization of America's in the depths of the depression, and we needed something to root for. This is, what is it? Unemployment rates in the United States. Here's the peak, 25%, 1933-ish. Airmail week, right in here. We're not out of the depression, but certainly things have gotten a whole lot better in that intervening time period. And what I see when I look at the accounts of this airmail week is not a country in the depths of a depression, but I see a sort of triumphant, really forward-looking vision, and this quilt is just an example of that. Tena emailed me this morning and said, "Do you have a PowerPoint?" I said, "No, I don't. I really wasn't planning on it." But then about 5 o'clock this afternoon, I came across a picture in some articles that Tena had sent me, and I said, I must share that picture, so therefore I must make a PowerPoint. So I made a real quick PowerPoint, and the first thing I want to stress is that Airmail Week is a big freaking deal, and then Lusk and Niobrara County is a big freaking deal, which totally blows my mind. But this is one sampling. This is, I was a really bad historian. I didn't take down when the date of the article was made or anything like that. I just took pictures real quick to make a PowerPoint so I could show you an image that you're gonna just love me for sharing. Anyway, at this point, the only state in the nation in 1932, so we're talking, I think, 48 states at this point, who hadn't sent a specific package to be airmailed was Arizona, and they were going to be coming soon. And then lest we get intoxicated by our relative familiarity with 1930, I think Tena's picture of the family in 1920 does a nice job of showing fashion distance. But I just like this. Most of us are familiar with stamp collectors. Quick show of hands, how many of you know practicing actual stamp collectors? All right, I knew we were gonna skew this way. I think if I went to my 151 class, the hands in the room would be significantly less. However, how many of you recognize the most passionate philatelists in your reach with murder and high treason? Back, I might add, when high treason actually meant something. Sorry. Anyway, I appreciate that. Yes, you know. So anyway, part of the weirdness of Niobrara County and the Airmail Week and the cachets that were on each post office the first time they'd ever done airmail, so that meant they were dedicating the post offices, is that there's a real passion for stamp collecting, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us today. But this was a big deal just because stamp collecting was already a big deal. Fair enough. I also love murder and high treason. Come on now. I got to have my stamp cancellation. These are some of the cachets from the 14 Niobrara County post offices, and I want to say there were thousands of individual cachets that were created for post offices across the United States for Airmail Week. So the fact that these exist isn't that unique. And I'm really, really happy I have this because I don't want to pass artistic judgment on these cachets. So I'm going to defer to Agnes Wright Spring, well-known Western writer, who says they're the most unique and interesting she's ever seen. So let's close the book on that. These are freaking amazing cachets. Again, I'm kind of making fun, but also just how big of a deal this is, you know? Kind of just, all right, anyway. And Shawn mentioned it, I'm sorry, Tena mentioned it, but the Lusk Lions Club seems to be the local growth organization that took the national directive and really made it something quite spectacular, quite out of the reach of most everything that I've seen regarding to this week in like US history. So yeah, so Lusk Lions Club. Also, this is from Hay Springs. This is Helen Gilmore, the postmaster of Hay Springs. And airmail saves time, saves money, preferential treatment. It's modern, economical. It's prestige in social and business communication. So again, it's a big, big freaking deal. And the connections between rural places who don't have airmail on the 20th anniversary of airmail, and then the impetus to bring airmail to it as a singular kind of thing, I don't know what that means, but I'm fascinated by it in some ways. Okay, keep moving. This is just classic Niobrara County to me. Lions Club starts talking about bringing airmail to the county. Well, of course, you know Harley Johnson, the pioneer pilot in Niobrara County, who's landed his plane in every cow pasture in the land already. He's going to get involved in this. He's going to volunteer his efforts. It's just beautiful, right? And I don't know if you guys have ever like driven through the sandhills and seen like, what do we call it? Where planes take off? Runway. A runway in the middle of nowhere. Like plains and rural America and those kind of connections too. I think there's an interesting point there that we could just sort of ponder for a little bit. The pioneer pilot. The pioneer pilot, right? Pioneers, old-timey, they got oxen and whatnot, pilots, modern age, and we got the pioneer pilot. But he's not the guy we want. No, 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 he's not the guy we want. Let's go ahead, Lusk County Lions. Let's go ahead and appoint a subcommittee, shall we? A 3-person subcommittee, and let's get them over to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, to recruit Everett Hogan, well-known pilot of Scottsbluff, Nebraska. And why do we recruit him? Well, he's the only certified pilot not trained by Boeing for airmail, and love me 2 times, baby. Do you know what I'm saying? Jeez Louise. Oh, just the knot, just the way it grips the neck. I mean, this is a tailored outfit. The hair. It's 1938, but it's timeless. Would you agree? Okay, anyway. Maybe I obsessed on Everett Hogan a little bit too much, but Everett Hogan brought in 2 planes. He was already contracted to supply mail elsewhere. He had a little plane that could take off and land at 25 miles an hour. He had a big plane that could take off and land at 65 miles an hour. Obviously, it takes more time to get up to 65 miles an hour. He was fully the man for the job. It's such a big deal, they're gonna bring in a newsreel cameraman to stage the pageant. And you have to have a pageant. I don't know why you have to have a pageant. When we first started doing research on this, I was like, what the heck is the pageant? What do you do? What do you do for a pageant that's basically a plane taking off, you know? And I didn't know about the Pioneer pilot at that point, so I didn't realize how handsome all this was gonna be. So the pageant, thank God for journalism, consists, as far as I can tell, of several significant members of town dressed in Eastern costume, getting off a wagon, meeting several significant figures in town in frontier costume, greeting the wagon, and then what the hell, let's throw in a Pony Express rider who hands some mail to the airplane, and then the plane takes off and we call it good. And let's have the stagecoach in there too to make continuity between all of this. And it's kind of dazzling to think about 50 years, maybe even less than that, where we go from, not quite Pony Express, but we go from very rural mail delivery based on a horse to something else, to the freaking airplane, right? So maybe let's go horse, train, airplane. Like this schizophrenic moment of progress. Also, we should probably keep in mind the Depression somewhere back there. They've lived through it, right? They're seeing something beyond them. Tena mentioned this as well, but I love it, right? This is Everett Hogan's itinerary for the day. He's going to land at the Martin Ranch to pick up the Node and Van Tassel mail at 5:15 a.m. Tough way to make a living, boys. The Zumbrunner Ranch. Anyway, so he's stopping in cow pastures to pick up mail from houses to be part of this national thing that eventually your grandmother makes a quilt about. For why? Do you know what I mean? Like, why does she make a quilt in the trailer? And I guess my argument is because it's kind of a big deal and people feel the big dealness of it. And this is my final little suggestion. Lusk 8th grader Marilise Barrett constructed a photographic essay of this trajectory of mail through the ages. Put it up in the Lusk post office and everybody loved it. And I'm wondering where your grandma starts to absorb, I need to make a quilt, right? And then the quilt eventually becomes part of the the Wyoming State, right? State Fair? Oh, Niobrara County. Yeah, not the Wyoming, Niobrara County. So then it becomes, after the fact, right, a touchstone for the community of this thing that in some ways is, right, connected to all these articles and all these other memories. So totally appreciate the opportunity to talk about this crazy thing, this American moment that I would say represents hope and the future, at the same time that they're really, really aware of how they're kind of still living in cow pastures. All right, that's my thing.
Why do you think she made this quilt? What are you thinking? Create a memory. Yeah, great answer. I think that's very true. And isn't that why lots of the rest of you quilt? I know that we have quilters in the room. Create memories. learn a new skill, perhaps. Use your artistic talents already to good use, which is what Tena shared over and over with us, is that she was very, very skilled in her artistic abilities. Not only did she do this, but she's also made toys back there in the back of the room, and then these little flowers that are represented there as well. But her drawings were just amazing, and so we've wrestled with how did she really do this? Knowing that the white fabric is really 100% cotton fabric, and then there's a layer of wool batting probably in between that's very, very thin, like this might be, and then backing it with a similar sort of fabric as well. But we wonder, how did she get those designs on there? Did she trace them on her own? We don't see any marks of that. So we know was probably no tracing paper to use, because it would have left marks for the quilt. And again, that's really not something that we've been able to notice here. So it would be nice to know how she got those on there. I'm assuming it's a lot of freehand, but then it kind of came to me that I'm wondering about holding the white fabric up to a window that she would have had, and maybe tracing around the designs from each of those cachets too, and then getting that original design before she did her own embroidery on the top of them. Very meticulous, wonderful artwork that she put into each one of those designs as she put them in there, and they're just so replicative of what you see with all those cachets that are represented in Tena's history book. So I hope you'll all take a chance to look at that. She also has kept all of her original design patterns as well that she created on her own from each one of these little postcards, or what I call postcards, cachets that have been represented as well. But it's really interesting to me as we've looked at this whole project and just the airmail industry as it has been told here in this quilt, but also learning about how it has happened over time. And a lot of what David shared with you, just the amazing effort that they all put into this historical event is truly remarkable, in my opinion. So I hope that you'll each, if you want to, take a white glove and put it on if you'd like to do some touching, but get close to it so you can look at her stitching and her designs and really think about the workmanship that has gone into this creation. And so happy that Tena has preserved it so well and her dad has helped her with her carpet roll to make that really a remarkable part of the historical event. It was displayed at the Wyoming State Fair, so that again means something also for those people in Wyoming to recognize her artistic ability. Make sense? Anybody have any other thoughts about how this might have been designs put on there? Maybe the rest of you do. I know I use chalk quite often, these little chalk pencils. I've used soap, the fine soap the bar soap after it gets used down, and you have just a little edging there on some of my colored fabric to do my markings. But this just doesn't show any of those, so we're just really puzzled, I think, by how she actually made that happen.
How long do you think it would have taken her?
Well, 2.5 months is by the time it was all finished, but she would have had to hand quilt it too, right? 3 months total.
3 months.
How many hours do you think?
Hours, oh golly whiz, a lot.
Hundreds?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure hundreds. And that's just the embroidering to begin with, and then we put it together, as you can see that she's quilted it as well. So.
How about the practicality of doing this in a little trailer with the deer? I mean, it's big. How do you do
Anything's
that?
possible.
How do you lay it out? How do you just piece it together?
Yeah, well, let's look at it to see. Let's look at it closer. Maybe all of you'd like to come a little closer and see how she did put it together. And let's maybe answer that question together. How about that? So join us up here at the table around a quilt. I know we have some wonderful quilters in here, so she has her little blocks, and she's probably used some sort of a hoop of some sort to put them together.
Okay.
And then she sewed them all together.
Okay.
So I think all that embroidery had to happen first. But isn't it remarkable, the design?
Yeah.
So I don't know how, we don't know how she got those on there.
16-year-old Tena not paying attention.
The composition of this, though, is just so gorgeous.
Isn't it though?
Decided to put the map in the middle.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
But I guess if you sew, you
I don't know, it's just very
Yeah.
well thought
Yeah,
out.
and this is all quality stitching. This is all perfect.
Look how fine they are.